We get a lot of questions on post-throwing routines and stretching after throwing, and we want to make a quick video on it. The 3 stretches we utilize are designed to restore range of motion that's lost as a result of throwing, especially throwing that's done at a high intensity for prolonged duration. For example, starting a game as a pitcher. When you start as a pitcher, you throw a lot of throws at a high intensity, and as a result, there's muscle breakdown and damage that occurs. When that happens, and we've seen it in the scientific literature, we lose range of motion. Most individuals will acutely lose about 15 degrees of shoulder internal rotation. So we test an athlete's rotation before a game, we test their rotation after the game, and generally they lose about 10 to 15 degrees from that before test to that after test. That's a lot of loss in range of motion. And we see that over time, not all of that loss persists, but a percentage of that does, and usually it's about 5 to 7 degrees. So let's say you threw a lot on Monday. On Friday, we test you, and you're still about 5 to 7 degrees less than you were when you went into that game on Monday. So what can we do about this loss? Because we've seen loss in internal rotation linked to pathology and shoulder pain in numerous scientific studies. Well, we have to stretch to recover that loss in range of motion. We can use soft tissue mobilization as well. Maybe we'll make a video on that. We've made some on that in the past. This video is specifically on the stretches with and without activation, so passive and active, that are designed to recover the lost range that occurs as a result of the workload that's encountered during pitching. The first stretch that we utilize is the internal rotation sleeper stretch. This is a stretch that's demonized sometimes by some individuals in the physical therapy community. I think that demonization is unrighteous, and the reason it occurs is because we see a lot of individuals doing these stretches incorrectly, where they're overpowering the range, their shoulders in a terrible position, they're cranking on something that maybe doesn't need to be stretched, and that's not what we're advocating here. We're going to talk about the specifics of the technique here in a second, but the idea being that you're going to recover the lost range in the position that range is lost, meaning where do I need that range of motion? Well, I need it in my follow-through. My arm is up and my shoulder internally rotates. Now, I need to make sure that none of these stretches cause pinching or pain, which is known as impingement, where the joint is actually compressing upon itself. I want to make sure there's none of that. You have to find a position of the arm relative to the body that's conducive to a good stretch without excessive pinching in the joint. Over the course of time, lost internal rotation, 5 degrees here, 5 degrees there, 5 degrees there. Eventually, we see that is going to be a big problem, and we've seen that reproduced over and over in the scientific literature as far as shoulder pathology and shoulder pain, and that's why we get scripts still in physical therapy that say GERD or glenohumeral internal rotation deficit, which some people will say doesn't exist, but I'll counter that point. Generally in our throwing shoulder, we need symmetrical range of motion, total arc of range, and that's true. If we took our whole range from internal to external, and let's say it's 150 on this side, on my throwing side it should be 150 on this side. If it's 160 on this side, maybe I've lost 10 degrees on the throwing side. However, most of our research now, and even in 2022, evaluating research studies, we're seeing that the throwing shoulder prior to compensatory movement of the shoulder blade needs about 50 degrees of internal rotation, some athletes more. In addition to that, the throwing shoulder will lose about 10 degrees of internal rotation as a result of throwing, because the humerus bone torsion. You should not see a deficit of 30 degrees internal rotation side to side and then say, oh, they're 30 degrees farther this way, because nobody's humerus torsions 30 degrees. I'm going to say there's some error in your calculations as far as assessment, or they really do have an internal rotation deficit that needs to be recovered. So we want about 50 degrees minimum internal rotation. That's a strict assessment of internal rotation. I've done assessments on that and videos on that in the past. However, let's get into these stretches. So you need internal rotation, you need range of motion across the chest to slow the arm down, you need full elbow extension to get the ball into the right position. So the first stretch is the sleeper stretch. You're going to lay on your back. You're rolled 45 degrees, so you're kind of on your back, kind of on your side. At that point, you're going to allow the arm to come down. You're going to stretch into internal rotation. While you're stretching into internal rotation, you're going to use a 2-finger force. The shoulder blade is pinned down by the table or the floor that you're laying on, and it's just 2 fingers because you're stretching delicate structures. In addition, the shoulder does not pop up towards the ear, and it doesn't pop up off the table or the floor. The shoulder has to stay pinned down and downward while you're doing the stretch. While you're doing that, you should have your elbow approximately at shoulder height, but you need to find a comfortable position there. We'll generally program this for 3 sets of 1 minute or 1 set of 2 minutes at a time. And if you're worried about holding a stretch just passively, which we're not, you can incorporate some activations of the stretched muscle pushing back into the fingers that are holding the arm down. The next stretch, and you can choose between these two. If that stretch bothers your shoulder, you don't like it, you can choose this other stretch, which is the same position, laying on your back, pinning the shoulder blade down, and now you're stretching the arm across the chest. You're going to use your glove hand to pull the arm across the chest. Should feel a stretch in the back of the shoulder, no pinching or no pain or stretching in the front of the shoulder. While you're doing this, you want to make sure the shoulder doesn't move up towards the ear too high. Keep the shoulder down and across, and you can do it with what we call more external rotation, which is the hand moving up towards the head, or internal rotation while the hand's moving down towards the shoulder. Depending on what parts of the shoulder you want to stretch, depending on how it feels. If one feels better than the other, choose that variation. The third stretch that we like to utilize with our athletes is the bat stretch. In this example, we are using a padded with a towel golf club to help extend the elbow. We know elbow extension is lost sometimes as a result of throwing. And so in this video, we are demonstrating it against the countertop into elbow extension for this particular athlete. You can utilize a bat, you can utilize a pipe, you can utilize a golf club, whatever you feel is comfortable or you have handy. Make sure to pad it if it's sensitive on the tricep area. And the bat or club should be just above the point or tip of your elbow, known as the olecranon process. This not only stretches the elbow into extension, but it also helps to glide the